I moved to the quiet town of Eldridge, Maine, about 6 months ago, seeking solitude after a messy divorce. The house I rented was an old Victorian on the edge of town, surrounded by dense pine forests that whispered in the wind. It was affordable, isolated, and perfect for someone like me who just wanted to disappear. The streets were lined with cracked sidewalks and flickering street lamps that cast long, wavering shadows after dusk. At first, everything felt peaceful, almost too still. I'd work from home during the day, typing away on my laptop, and in the evenings, I'd sit on the porch with a book, listening to the distant hoot of owls. But soon, that peace started to feel off, like the silence was watching me back. It began subtly, the way these things do. One night, as I was washing dishes in the kitchen, I glanced out the window above the sink. The backyard was pitch black, save for the faint glow from the neighbor's distant porch light. But there, at the edge of the tree line, I thought I saw a shape. Not a deer or a raccoon, something taller, humanoid, but motionless. I blinked, and it was gone. I chalked it up to fatigue, my eyes playing tricks in the dark. The next morning, I found a single footprint in the soft mud near the fence, too large for mine, with no tread marks. I told myself it was a hiker who'd wandered off path. But that night, the shape returned, closer this time. Just beyond the glow of my floodlight, the unease grew like mold in the damp corners of my mind. I started double-checking locks before bed, drawing curtains tight. Eldridge wasn't known for crime. It was a sleepy place where folks left doors unlocked. But I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. During a late-night walk to clear my head stupid, I know the fog rolled in thick from the nearby river, muffling sounds. I heard footsteps echoing mine, but when I turned, the street was empty. Just abandoned cars parked along the curb, their windows frosted over. Back home, I peered through the peephole, nothing. Yet as I lay in bed, a soft scratching came from the attic, like nails on wood. Mice, I reasoned. But deep down, I knew better. Days blurred into routine laced with paranoia. I'd catch glimpses in mirrors, a shadow flitting across the hallway when I was alone. The house creaked more than usual, old pipes groaning like distant whispers. One afternoon, while sorting mail on the kitchen table, I found an envelope with no stamp, no address, just my name scrawled in jagged letters. Inside was a crumpled photo of my front door, taken from across the street. No note, no explanation. My heart raced as I crumpled it up and burned it in the sink. Who would do this? An ex? A prank? I installed a cheap security camera, its red light blinking reassuringly. But that night, reviewing footage, I saw it. A figure standing stock still in the yard, face obscured by darkness, unmoving for hours. The camera became my obsession. I'd wake at odd hours, scrolling through recordings on my phone. The figure appeared sporadically, always at night, always in the periphery. It never moved when captured, just stood there, watching. I zoomed in once. No eyes visible, but the posture was rigid, unnatural, like it didn't need to blink or breathe. I called the local police, but they dismissed it as a vagrant or wildlife. "Eldridge is safe," the officer said over the phone. "Lock your doors." That advice felt hollow as I barricaded myself in the living room, the TV droning to drown out the silence. Outside, rain pattered against the windows, blurring the world into a watery haze. Isolation fed the dread. Friends from the city stopped calling. I hadn't reached out. The town felt smaller, its empty shops and overgrown parks amplifying my solitude. One evening, as dusk fell, I ventured to the local library, an ancient building with dusty shelves and flickering fluorescents. Researching stalkers online only heightened my fear. Stories of shadows that followed, entities that mimicked humans. Back home, the power flickered during a storm, plunging everything into black. In the brief flashes of lightning, I saw it through the curtain gap, closer now, pressed against the glass. A silhouette that didn't flinch at the thunder. sleep evaded me, replaced by nightmares of unblinking eyes. I jolt awake to knocking soft, insistent at the back door. Peering out, nothing. But the next day, scratches marred the wood, deep gouges like from claws. I bought motion lights, flooding the yard with harsh white beams. They triggered constantly, leaves, wind, but once, the camera caught it mid-stride elongated limbs, too thin, vanishing into the woods. My breath caught. It wasn't human. Or if it was, something had twisted it. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow, the house's walls closing in like a tomb. The escalation was relentless. Whispers now, not just creaks my name murmured through vents, faint but clear. I tore open the attic access, flashlight beam cutting through cobwebs. Empty, save for dusty boxes and a single chair facing the small window overlooking the yard. Had it been up here? Watching from inside? Panic surged as I found drawings in the dust, crude outlines of my house with a stick figure outside staring in. I barricaded the attic, but that night, the power cut out completely. In the dark, I heard breathing, slow, rhythmic, outside my bedroom door. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Arming myself with a flashlight and the knife, I stepped outside at midnight, heart pounding. The forest loomed, branches like skeletal fingers. "Show yourself," I shouted, voice cracking. Silence, then rustling. It emerged from the trees, not a man, but a shadow given form, tall and gaunt, eyes like voids that never blinked. It mirrored my movements, stepping when I did, stopping when I froze. Terror gripped me. This wasn't a stalker of flesh, but something ancient, drawn to my loneliness like a moth to flame. The town legends whispered of it, an entity born from forgotten graves in the woods, fleeing back inside. I slammed the door, but it was too late. The shadow seeped under the threshold, pooling like ink on the floor. It reformed in the hallway, unblinking gaze piercing mine. I slashed wildly with the knife, but it passed through like smoke. Backing into the kitchen, I grabbed salt from the pantry, old wives' tailies be damned, and scattered it in a circle. The thing hissed, recoiling, its form flickering. But it adapted, tendrils reaching over the barrier. My mind raced. Fire? Light? I fumbled for matches, igniting the curtains. Flames roared, illuminating its grotesque features, skin like withered bark, eyes eternal. The house burned around us, smoke choking the air. The shadow lunged, cold fingers grazing my skin, whispering secrets of isolation that chilled my soul. In desperation, I smashed the window and leaped out, rolling into the wet grass. Sirens wailed in the distance, neighbors must have called. As flames consumed the Victorian, the shadow writhed inside, trapped by the inferno's light. It let out a silent scream, dissolving into ash. I collapsed, watching my life burn, but free at last. The police found no body, no evidence. They called it arson from faulty wiring. But I know the truth. Some shadows don't blink because they're not alive. They wait, eternal, for the lonely ... epilogue. I left Eldridge, moving to a bustling city where lights never dim. But sometimes, in crowds, I feel it a prickling on my neck. Shadows are everywhere, after all, and some never forget. I moved into that old apartment building in downtown Chicago last winter, chasing a cheap rent in a city that never sleeps. The place was a relic from the 1920s, with creaky wooden floors and walls that seemed to absorb every sound. My unit was on the 4th floor, a cramped one-bedroom with high ceilings and these ancient air vents snaking through the rooms like veins in a decaying body. At first, it felt cozy in a rundown way, faded wallpaper peeling at the edges, a single window overlooking the dimly lit alley. But something about the vents bothered me from day one. They hummed faintly at night, carrying echoes from the floors below. I shrugged it off as urban noise, the kind you get used to. The first whisper came on a rainy evening in late January. I was alone, sipping coffee at my rickety kitchen table, when a soft murmur drifted from the vent above the sink. It sounded like muffled words, too faint to make out, like someone talking through a pillow. I froze, straining to listen, but it faded into the patter of rain against the window. Probably just the neighbors. I thought the building was full of them, voices bleeding through thin walls. But as the night wore on, the whispers returned, irregular and insistent, pulling at the edges of my sanity. I checked the vents, shining a flashlight into the dusty grates, but saw only shadows and cobwebs. By February, the whispers had become a nightly ritual. They'd start around midnight, low and garbled, seeping from vents in the bedroom, bathroom, even the hallway closet. Sometimes it was a chuckle, other times a sigh, but always indistinct. I started sleeping with earplugs, but they only amplified my heartbeat. One morning, I found a small scrap of paper wedged in the bedroom vent, yellowed and torn, with smudged ink that read, "Watching." My stomach dropped. Was it a prank? I asked the super, an old man named Gus, but he laughed it off, saying the vents connected the whole building like a maze. Ghosts of tenants past, he joked. But I wasn't laughing. I began documenting everything. A journal by my bed, noting times and what I thought I heard. Hello. One night, clear as day. Then, I see you. My skin crawled. I taped over the vents with duct tape, but the sounds persisted, muffled but angrier. Paranoia set in. I double-checked locks, avoided the windows after dark. The building's hallways felt longer, shadows pooling in corners where lights flickered. I searched online for similar stories, finding tales of vent stalkers in old high-rises, but dismissed them as urban legends. Still, I bought a small camera, mounting it facing the living room vent, hoping to catch something. March brought colder winds, and the whispers evolved. They mimicked my routines, humming tunes I'd sung in the shower, repeating phrases from my phone calls. One evening, as I cooked dinner, a voice hissed, "Burn it," just as the stove flared up. I jumped back, heart racing. Was someone in the vents? The idea was absurd, but I pried open a grate in the bathroom, crawling partway in with a flashlight. The duct was narrow, filthy, branching into darkness. I found nothing but rat droppings and old wires. That night, the whispers laughed, a low, mocking rumble that echoed through the walls. Sleepless nights blurred into days. I lost weight, my eyes hollow from exhaustion. Friends noticed, but when I told them, they suggested therapy or moving out. It's stress, they said. But I knew better. One afternoon, sorting mail, I found an envelope with no stamp inside. A photo of my apartment door, taken from inside the building. Scribbled on the back, "Closer than you think." Panic surged. I called the police, but without evidence, they brushed it off as a neighbor's joke. I barricaded the door that night, but the whispers grew louder, chanting my name softly, over and over. April's thaw didn't ease the chill in my bones. I rigged motion sensors near the vents, alarms that blared at the slightest vibration. They went off constantly, false positives from wind or settling building. But one recording captured it, a voice whispering, "I live here too." I played it back, volume cranked, and heard breathing, rhythmic and close. Desperate, I explored the basement, a labyrinth of boilers and storage lockers. Dust-covered vents led upward, disappearing into the structure. In one corner, I found a loose panel, revealing a crawl space. My flashlight revealed scratches on the metal, like nails dragging. The whispers turned personal. They recounted my childhood fears, spiders, abandonment, details I'd never shared. How? I tore apart my apartment, searching for bugs or cameras, finding none. One stormy night, power outage plunged everything into black. The vents amplified the thunder, but amid it, a clear voice. "Come find me." I grabbed a crowbar, heart pounding, and smashed open the largest vent in the living room. Dust billowed out, and I peered inside. A faint light flickered far down the duct. Impossible but real. Crawling in was madness, but I did it. The duct was tighter than expected, metal cold against my skin. Claustrophobia clawed at me as I inched forward, flashlight clamped in teeth. The whispers guided me, growing louder, deeper. Yes. Branches split off, a network of forgotten passages. Sweat stunned my eyes. After what felt like hours, I reached a junction, a small chamber, lit by a stolen lamp. There, amid wrappers and blankets, was evidence of habitation. Newspapers with my face circled, photos pinned to the walls. The stalker wasn't a ghost, he was real. A squatter who'd wormed into the building's guts years ago, surviving on scraps, watching tenants through the vents. I backed away, but heard footsteps scraping metal. Panic exploded. I scrambled backward, the duct echoing my gasps. Something grabbed my ankle, a hand, cold and strong. I kicked free, crowbar swinging wildly in the confined space. The whispers turned to screams, echoing everywhere. I burst out into my apartment, sealing the vent with furniture, calling 911. Police arrived, skeptical but thorough. They pried open vents building wide, finding a network of hidden spaces. In the depths, they discovered him, gaunt man. Feral from isolation, muttering about his home. He'd been there for decades. Evicted long ago, but never left. Using the vents to spy, to live vicariously. He knew everything about me, from overheard calls, stolen mail. They dragged him out, but not before he whispered one last thing. I'll always be listening. Months later, I moved to a modern condo. No vents, just central air. But some nights, in the quiet, I swear I hear it, a faint murmur from the walls. Therapy says it's PTSD, but I know better. He's out there, or someone like him, in the hidden veins of old buildings. If you live in one, listen closely. The whispers might be for you. The experience shattered me. I avoid old architecture now, sticking to glass towers. But the memory lingers, the way sounds traveled, intimate and invasive. I check air returns obsessively, tape over grates. Friends think I'm paranoid, but they've never felt eyes from the dark. Looking back, the building was a tomb, vents its breath. It started subtle, a hum, then words, then proof. The climax? Facing the void, finding the monster within. It haunts me still. In the end, the terror was human, all too real. No ghosts, just a man lost in the walls. But in Chicago's underbelly, who knows how many more whisper through the vents. It started innocently enough, back in the fall of 2023. When I moved to the sleepy town of Eldridge Hollow in upstate New York. The place was one of those forgotten corners of America, old Victorian houses sagging under the weight of decades. Streets lined with skeletal maple trees that whispered in the wind. I took a job as a night shift clerk at the local library, figuring the quiet would help me focus on my writing. But from the first week, something felt off. I'd walk home after midnight, the fog rolling in from the nearby river, and I'd swear I heard an extra set of footsteps echoing mine on the cracked sidewalks. At first, I dismissed it as paranoia. Eldridge Hollow had a reputation for ghost stories. Locals talked about the old mill by the river where workers vanished in the 1800s. But I wasn't the type to believe in that nonsense. I'd stop walking, and the footsteps would stop too, a split second later. Maybe it was an echo from the brick walls of the abandoned warehouses nearby. Or perhaps the wind playing tricks through the alleyways. I laughed it off with my coworker, old Mrs. Hargrove, who just shook her head and muttered about the hollow's whispers. But the incidents escalated subtly. One evening, as I sorted books in the dim-lit stacks of the library, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The building was empty, save for the creak of settling wood. I paused, and there it was again, not footsteps this time, but a soft scraping, like nails on the floorboards above. The library was 2 stories, but the upper level was cordoned off for renovations. I called out, my voice echoing hollowly, but no answer came. When I checked the security camera feed later, it showed nothing, just static flickering over the empty halls. Nights blurred into unease. Walking home became a ritual of tension. The footsteps grew bolder, matching my pace perfectly, even when I varied my speed slowing to a crawl or breaking into a jog. They were always there, invisible, unrelenting. I'd spin around, flashlight from my phone piercing the fog, but the street was deserted. No animals, no drifters. Just the empty road winding toward my rented cottage on the edge of town, where the woods pressed in like silent sentinels. I started researching online, delving into forums about auditory hallucinations. Stress, they said, isolation. But Eldridge Hollow had its own dark history. I found old newspaper clippings digitized in the library's archives, disappearances dating back centuries, always lone walkers at night, reports of echoing pursuits before they vanished. One article from 1927 described a man who claimed an unseen entity mimicked his every step until he was driven mad. He was found in the river, drowned with no signs of struggle. The dread built like a storm. At home, I'd lock the doors, draw the curtains, but the sounds infiltrated. A creak on the porch when no wind blew. A faint tapping at the window, rhythmic, like footsteps circling the house. I installed motion sensor lights, but they never triggered. One night I lay awake, heart pounding, and heard it inside soft footfalls pacing the hallway outside my bedroom. The door was locked from within. I didn't sleep until dawn. Desperation drove me to confide in a local historian, Dr. Elias Thorne, who lived in a crumbling manor on the hill. Over tea in his cluttered study, he spoke of the Echo Stalker, a legend born from the Mills tragedy. Workers, he said, were buried alive in a collapse, their spirits doomed to mimic the living, drawing them into the shadows. It's not malice, he whispered, but hunger for company. His eyes gleamed oddly, and as I left, I heard footsteps trailing me down his gravel path, his, or something else's. The mimicking evolved. No longer just footsteps. My breath seemed echoed in the quiet, a faint inhale-exhale from the corners of rooms. I'd whisper to myself, testing, and hear a whisper back, garbled, like through water. At work, books would shift on shelves when my back was turned, pages fluttering as if read by invisible hands. I caught glimpses in mirrors' shadows that lingered a beat too long, but never direct sight. Panic set in. I avoided going out after dark, but the entity adapted. Daytime walks brought distant echoes, like footsteps from parallel streets. Friends from the city called, concerned by my rambling voicemails, but how could I explain without sounding insane? I set up audio recorders around the house. Playback revealed nothing at first, then, buried in static, a faint patter, syncing with my recorded movements. The turning point came during a storm. Thunder rattled the windows as I huddled in my living room, lightning flashing across the woods. The footsteps started outside, circling, then pounded up the porch steps. The door handle jiggled once, twice. I grabbed the kitchen knife, backing away. A whisper seeped through the keyhole. My own name, distorted, pleading. Join us. I fled to the library that night, barricading myself in the basement archives. Rain hammered the roof as I pored over forbidden tomes. Dr. Thorne had mentioned rituals to banish echoes. But as I read, the footsteps resumed, descending the stairs. Slow, deliberate. The basement light flickered, plunging me into darkness punctuated by lightning. In the flashes, I saw it not a figure, but a void, a distortion in the air where footsteps imprinted the dusty floor. The climax hit like a wave. The entity closed in, its presence suffocating, mimicking my ragged breaths, my heartbeat thundering in echo. I chanted the ritual from the book, voice trembling, salt circle hastily drawn around me. The footsteps halted at the edge, then surged forward. Invisible force rattling shelves, books tumbling like dominoes. A scream not mine tore through the air, raw and ancient, as the void twisted, pulling at my clothes, my skin. In that moment, I understood. It wasn't pursuit for malice, but replication. It wanted to become me, to echo until there was no original left. I thrust the knife forward blindly, feeling resistance like cutting through fog turned solid. A wail erupted, shaking the foundations, and the presence recoiled. Footsteps retreating up the stairs, fading into the storm. Dawn broke, the storm cleared. I emerged shaken, the town bathed in innocent sunlight. No more echoes followed me home. But sometimes, in quiet moments, I catch my reflection lingering a second too long, or hear a faint step in sync with mine. Was it banished, or did it merge? Eldridge Hollow keeps its secrets, and now perhaps I'm one of them. I've shared this not for belief, but warning. If you hear footsteps that echo your own, stop walking, listen closely. It might already be too late.